Call this meeting to order, and we'll start with the roll call, please.
Carr. Cruz. Here. Fox.
Here.
Frost. Here. Gaylord.
Here.
Guerra. Hanson. Harris.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Natoli. Peters. Cerna. Terry.
Okay.
We have a quorum.
We have a quorum, so with that, we'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance, which today we'll have led by Director Gaylord. Sorry.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first one I saw as I turned. All right. So with that, we'll move on to announcements. The board, would you read the television announcement, please?
This meeting of the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District is cablecast live without interruption on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast Consolidated Communications and AT&T Uverse cable system. This meeting is being closed captioned and will be webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will be repeated on Saturday, September 29th at 2 p.m. and Monday, October 1st at 4 p.m. on Channel 14. Members of the audience wishing to address the board should fill out a speaker form located on the table at the back of the chambers and give it to the clerk. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record. Also, at this time, please silence your cell phones until the conclusion of today's meeting.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move on to the Air Pollution Control Officer's report.
Very good. Good morning, board. Thank you for joining us. Good to see you here. We have a full agenda for you today, a couple of important discussion items, and as usual, I'm going to run through a number of items that I think are relevant to us and in particular to you as our board. So let me go ahead and go through that. The first one is, again, informational. The Coalition for Clean Air is longest-standing, very respected statewide NGO, is running a campaign that they've dubbed the California Cleaner Day, coming up next month. And they have made us and other districts aware of this campaign, and it's simply to raise awareness. Obviously, we're making good progress throughout the state in terms of combating air pollution, but at the same time, we're all fully aware and reminded every summer of the challenges of still excess air pollution. So what they're doing is they're running this campaign, and they've invited us to join them. It's fairly straightforward. They want us to promote the concept today. We are going to internally try to come up with some good ideas to engage our staff. You may hear about it in the news, your constituents. So I wanted to make you aware of that. That is happening next week. I think from my perspective, anything that raises awareness and kind of puts this in front of people, say why we need clean air, it's important. But the Coalition for Clean Air gets the credit for this. I'm just passing it along to you. Along the same lines of sharing with you actions by our sister agencies in the region that are relevant and important to our equality, I wanted to highlight for you what the Sacramento Municipal Utility District is doing. I don't know to what extent you're following this closely. I am. I'm typically out at the board meetings engaging with them. SMUD has taken a leadership role in California and the nation for that matter, and they've actually embrace the idea of doing more than what the state is requiring for utilities to do and doing it sooner. And what that means is that the SMUD board is actually deliberating a net zero carbon commitment for 2040. It's remarkable because, again, the long-term goal for climate is 2050. Obviously, just a couple weeks ago, the governor issued new legislation, new laws that are going to put the state on a path towards carbon neutrality in 2045. So this is still very relevant because they're accelerating what the state is doing. And from what I've seen at the board discussion, it's likely going to happen. The SMUD board is likely going to commit to a net zero carbon goal by 2040. Why is that important? Obviously, because we're talking about a huge utility, the 6th largest municipal utility in the country. And clearly, as you have heard from us, and we focus on electrifying transportation as the biggest source of our emissions, we want to make sure that the electrons that go into the cars of the future are green electrons. So this step is very consistent with what we want to accomplish. The other thing, on the other side as well, is obviously electric generating utilities are big sources of emissions. SMUD is in the top 10 of our big sources of emissions. So anything that they do to reduce not only their carbon footprint, but to reduce emissions in general is something that we welcome. I wanted to share that with you. Again, they're following the procedure for the integrated resource plan that they have to submit to the Energy Commission in April. But like I said, it does look, from what I've seen at the board discussion, that this is likely going to move ahead, which is great news for all of us. Speaking of collaborations, at the moment, as we speak, we have a delegation in Germany led by the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. The reason I bring that to you is because one of the reasons that we're missing Director Guerra and Director Serna, as well as one of our senior managers, is they are in the delegation along with GSAC and others. And the reason they went to Germany is because Sacramento region in general is becoming a focal point for mobility innovation and zero emission technology. And the business side of our region is trying to attract obviously investment for technology manufacturing. Where we come in is clearly, we as an air district, as a regulatory agency, we can put in place policies that actually support and guide that development to the region. So just wanted to put that before you. Hopefully next meeting in October, when our directors are back and our staff will give you a little bit more in terms of how the meeting went. You might have heard about this on the radio. I did. The next item I have for you, another very important event that happened here in California and San Francisco not long ago. It was the Global Climate Action Summit, which really highlighted the role of cities and localities to fill the gap in terms of the climate agenda that we currently suffer from, not only at the federal level, but internationally. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend. I was actually out on vacation that week, but we had our staff did attend. We covered several events, and I'm going to have Mark Lutzenhauser give us a brief update.
Good morning, Board. Mark Lautzenizer, Division Manager for Program Coordination. As Alberto already mentioned, there were a number of different activities going on. We actually were able to attend 4 different events over the course of the week, some of us running back and forth between events, same day even. So just touching upon some of those very quickly. One of them was the Diesel Free by 33 event being hosted by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, which is a very aggressive strategy to go ahead and reduce diesel emissions in their area. It was very well attended. It was a great discussion. We actually had Mayor Steinberg from Sacramento, who also signed on to the pledge, just supporting them, was there and was actually one of the speakers in the afternoon. Definitely did a great job highlighting a lot of the efforts that Sacramento as a whole, both the county and the city, have been working on in terms of our transportation, our corridors, and just all the great work we've been doing. In addition to that, UC Davis was hosting a summit related to greenhouse gas emissions. Again, surprisingly, a big focus was transportation. There was a lot of great speakers, international speakers, local speakers, and other national speakers from elsewhere in the country, talking a lot about where they were going with their public transportation, what they're looking to do with their fleets, where they were looking to go with the sources of cleaning up those emissions even. So as Alberto had just mentioned a moment ago, when we were talking about SMUD and the great efforts our local utility is doing, it was also part of the focus there on that discussion. 2 other quick ones that were going on was CalSTART was hosting a workshop as well, focused a lot on some of the programs they're doing in the state of California, a lot of incentive programs, and so they were definitely doing, theirs was a Drive to Zero workshop, very effective. The staff that were at that one said there was some great feedback. They were also part of the presentations themselves. And the final one that we were able to attend was the Air Sensors International Conference, which was a big part of what was going on. It was a multi-day conference. I will sum it up in just a couple of short words here, in the sense that the big focus was, as you'd imagine, on monitoring. And so they were looking at a lot of the low-cost sensors, which is a great tie-in with our local 617 efforts and how we're going to be going into the communities, and that's actually being heard by the California Air Resources Board as we speak on that selection of a community. But also then the importance of how those sensors do compare to the regulatory monitors themselves, and that they are not a replacement for the regulatory monitors, and a lot about how we message that information to the public. So as they do look at data that comes in from these low-cost sensors, and they see some numbers that may otherwise seem high, that they don't become alarmed unnecessarily. They're good sensors. They're good in the sense of providing that information of the ups and downs of what's going on, the relative nature in the morning. If it's lower, afternoon it picks up. That is true. Is it reading, for example, an 80 when the actual regular monitors are reading 20? No, we got to trust the regulatory monitor. But the ups and downs and just that helping to give them that information, though, is very effective, and the messaging will be a key piece as we move forward, both with this technology as a whole, but also as a good reminder as we move forward with our AB 617 community monitoring. And that's a quick wrap up on the Global Climate Summit.
Thank you, Mark. As Mark mentioned, one of the key policies that was rolled out, a key pledge, was this effort by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, Diesel Free by 33. It is relevant for us because obviously diesel combustion is a big source of emissions for us. Diesel emissions are also known carcinogens. That's not to say that other combustion is good for you. Diesel emission is the one that has been studied the most and is recognized. And what I want to leave you with is Mayor Steinberg, on behalf of the city of Sacramento, did make the pledge. She was there. Obviously, we were in conversation with the city, talking to his staff. It's a pledge, so now comes the tough part of trying to figure out exactly what it means for our region. But again, this is very consistent with the agenda for clean air that this agency has embraced for many years. The fact that we're going to continue to push to clean technology, we're going to continue to push for getting access to state investment so that we can buy our way into lower emitting sources, all the way down to zero as soon as we can. So stay tuned. We'll bring you updates as they develop. And the last thing I want to share with you, and I was hoping that we would have at least Director Hansen here, but unfortunately he's not feeling too good this morning, and we're missing Director Guerra. The reason I wanted them here is because they were actually part of the press event that Mayor Steinberg and Mayor Cabaldan held a couple of weeks ago to roll out this new idea of the Mayor's Commission on Climate Change. I had mentioned this before to you in one of my reports. It is out there. We began to convene the large group of actors that are going to contribute to it. We have yet to define precisely the scope and the depth of what this is going to do. But again, from our perspective, this becomes another very important tool. It'll give us a platform to run ideas through other folks, to collaborate, to sort of get unified behind a common goal and an agenda that can help us amplify and leverage the things that we can do as an air district. So again, just wanted to share that with you. Also stay tuned as we develop more concepts and a precise idea in terms of what we're going to do with this. We'll bring it back to you. So that is my report for this board hearing. If you have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to entertain them. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you very much. So with that, we'll move on to our consent calendar. Consent calendar items are things that are normally deemed routine and non-controversial. Is there anything that anybody has questions on or needs to pull from the calendar? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move consent.
I'm sorry. Okay. Motion by Cruz. Do I have a second? Second by Gaylord. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, so we'll move on to our discussion calendar, and our first item is item 5, District Authority over Cannabis Operations Final Staff Assessment. Now here's something that I bet Director Guerra would have wanted to hear. Considering I'm pretty sure all of it's being grown in his district, or will be.
Good morning, Board, Chair Terry and the rest of the Board. My name is Brian Krebs. I'm a Program Supervisor in the Stationary Source Division in the Permitting Section. And today I'd like to give you a brief presentation on our final assessment on permitting and enforcement authority over cannabis operations. Just as a little background, we met and I gave a presentation back in January earlier this year where we gave some potential impacts due to this new emerging cannabis industry. And at that time, we gave some preliminary assessment as to what kinds of regulatory authority we may have over the operations. Since that time, we've formulated and finalized our authority, and that's what I'll be giving you some information on. But that authority was, is this gone off? Okay. The authority has been, I'm just confused, I apologize. What I was going to say was that in developing the final authority, we went through a long, arduous process where we met with many districts throughout California and various committees to find out, what their thoughts were on that. We met with our own legal counsel to discuss different issues. And from that, we kind of finalized our authority. We came up with a matrix of permitting actions, and we subsequently had discussions with some members of the board as well as city staff to discuss where we were going with that, as well as to solicit comments and to work on inter-entity coordination. Now, for the authority, the meat and potatoes of this is that we have to split it into two different groups, and that is cultivation and the manufacturing. And this slide here represents the cultivation. And in general, cultivation, in our opinion, in our authority, is that it is a agricultural operation. And as such, it is exempt from district permitting authority per our own Rule 201, Section 114. In addition, odors emanating from agricultural operations are exempt from public nuisance. And that authority stems from California Health and Safety Code. Now, as far as power generation, and that was one of the main issues that we were concerned about with this new industry, is that power generation used exclusively for cultivation. And let me just break up a little bit the fact that when we talk about prime power, we're talking about generators, electric generators that operate continuously as their prime utility power. Emergency standby engines are just that. They're used in the event that power is lost from the local utility. So with that said, stationary prime power, since we have no permitting authority, it falls under the state's distributed generation requirements. And that's a health and safety code section. And then in addition, and that would apply to any, whether it's natural gas or diesel, but in addition, if a diesel engine were to be proposed for prime power, it would also have to fall under the state air toxic control measure and obtain agricultural engine registration. Then when we talk about emergency standby equipment, if it's greater than 50 horsepower, it still would also have to get that agriculture engine registration, but all other fuels would be exempt. So that's our only permitting requirements, and they're not really permitting requirements, they are just requirements that would be put on the cultivation. Now, as far as manufacturing goes, we're talking about things that generate particulate matter, such as sifting, squeezing, screening, or items that generate volatile organic compounds, and it's kind of ironic that it's called non-volatile solid extraction, but one determination of that is that ethanol is considered by definition of this definition to be non-volatile, but as far as the air district is concerned, it is volatile, so we would be concerned with that. And then as far as permitting requirements go, it really, because manufacturing is not considered agricultural, it falls under our normal permitting requirements and exemptions, and that essentially is the 2 pounds per day. If it's greater than 2 pounds per day, then it would require a permit for either the particulate matter emissions, if there are such, or greater than 2 pounds per day for VOCs from ethanol in the so-called non-volatile solid extraction process. And then as far as odor goes, in general, if a facility is not required to get a permit for any of the other 2 requirements that we just mentioned, then we could still require a permit if it's been determined that it's necessary in order to abate a public nuisance. So in other words, if we receive odor complaints or other health concerns from VOC emissions that are less than the permit criteria up above, we would require a permit for the odor control and abatement of that. And then on the power generation side for manufacturing, we do have permitting authority, but again, it falls under our normal permitting authority, and that is that power generation, natural gas or diesel, stationary or portable, a permit would be required if the engine is greater than 50 horsepower. And it would also be required, even if it's less than 50 horsepower, if it's determined that it's part of a process that ordinarily would require a permit. And then lastly, or conversely, permit would be exempt if it's less than 50 horsepower and not part of a process. And then as far as combined operations go, that's operations that have both cultivation and manufacturing. The manufacturing part of it would require permitting in accordance with the requirements for manufacturing. And it would only be exempt if the applicant could prove to us that it is solely used in the cultivation side of it. But if it has any operational characteristics that apply to the manufacturing side, then it would require a permit. One of the questions that was asked of us was about illegal cannabis operations. And so we had to look at what we could potentially do as far as our authority goes. And if we're talking about manufacturing or combined operation, a permit would be required, or if yes, meaning that if a permit or if the emissions were such that they were above our permitting thresholds, then the potential violation of District Rule 201 would be the failure to obtain a permit. Again, this is for illegal manufacturing operations. And then on Rule 402 nuisance, since we do have nuisance authority, it would be potential, assuming that they did cause a public nuisance. As far as illegal cultivation,
Actually, we have a quick question from
yes.
Director Natoli.
Yeah, just as you're talking about illegal cultivation and or operation, you say without city permits. In the other jurisdictions, maybe with the exception of Ileton, is considering some changes. The unincorporated area, and I believe other cities, have prohibited both grows and manufacture, and so that would apply even though we don't have, there's not a structure in place for permitting legal operations. Illegal is illegal, and so therefore those would apply in those other jurisdictions as well?
Well, I guess what we're saying is that from a city standpoint, it's illegal because they didn't get the proper authorizations. But from an air district standpoint, it comes down to whether or not the emissions are above.
But you missed my point. My point is if if they're not even permitted and they're operating, they could still be in violation just because there's a structure to permit legal versus illegal operations in the city of Sacramento. In the unincorporated area of the county of Sacramento, I'll let other cities speak for themselves. If it's not permitted at all, and they were to utilize equipment that was in violation of air standards, they would just be in just as much a violation without permits there as well, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so I want to be clear because it says without city permits, and that would be multiple cities and or counties because there's not a regulatory structure for permitting them at all in most of those other jurisdictions. And I just want to be clear about that because it's not just, the question's been asked in the city of Sacramento, but this would apply in the county. So you could have similar violations in the unincorporated area. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, those rules would apply.
And just to emphasize the point, Director Natoli, you're absolutely correct. And we will make an adjustment to make sure that we clarify that point.
Okay.
But illegal is illegal anywhere in the county. And to the extent that we are able to have access and find it, then what we're talking about in terms of our authority would apply.
Or you got brought to you by a code officer or some other, or a law enforcement operation, then you were looking at multiple tracks for approaching the illegality, then the air district could be brought into it. I'm not saying you'd necessarily be doing the enforcement initially, but you might be brought into the overall structure of a case that was made against a particular operation.
That is correct, and that has been a point that we've made very clear because obviously we're not first responders.
Right.
We're not going to be the ones going in first. But to the extent that there is a process, and this has been part of the conversation with the city of Sacramento, to the extent that there is a process by which we can then determine that the limit of 2 pounds per day has been exceeded, then this would apply. So we will make that adjustment. The point is well taken. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. As far as engines, power generation goes, again, if we're talking about just cultivation, they would be exempt from a permit, but other potential violations that we could potentially process would be the distributed generation requirements or the diesel ATCM, the stationary diesel ATCM. That would be if those equipment fell into either one of those categories. And then as far as illegal cultivation operation, since again there's no district permit requirement, and we don't have permit or nuisance authority over it, essentially we have no regulatory authority to write a violation under those circumstances. And then as far as potential fines that could be assessed, depends. Typically we're talking about failure to obtain a permit, and you're looking somewhere in the ballpark of $1,000 to $25,000, and it's a range. Another issue that we want to talk about are other potential impacts, and that would be from VOC or greenhouse gases from from cannabis waste, the disposal of cannabis waste. We did a back-of-the-envelope calculation and determined that we're talking probably around 40 acres of cannabis grown per year. And currently, the majority of this cannabis waste is disposed of at the county landfill. You may be aware of SB 1383, which is the short-lived climate pollutant regulation that pertains to organic waste from methane or organic waste methane emissions. It's essentially organic waste diversion. And we had to try to figure out whether this additional acreage was factored in on that at all. And conversations with Cal Recycle believes that the cannabis waste will represent a very small portion of the overall green waste. So they didn't specifically account for it in their process. However, it's a very small amount in the overall scheme of things. So they don't foresee that as causing much of a problem. And then lastly, as far as next steps, We are currently working on developing, or we have developed a web page that will have information on there, such as the permit applicability matrix that someone can look to see whether or not they need a permit application forms, and contact person. We are going to develop an advisory that will be sent out to each of the cannabis operators that have conditional use permits, referring them to our website and getting the proper information. And then lastly, we've committed to going to the City of Sacramento stakeholder meeting to engage with the cannabis industry to answer any questions they have regarding permit applicability, and getting them to, answering their questions and directing them to the appropriate places to get their permits. And that concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
Any questions for staff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Director Harris.
So you may know that the City of Sacramento is actively trying to permit and bring these operations into the light, if you will. I would say there's a general amount of ignorance about, the air aspect of cultivation. So there's a lot of education to do with these new permittees, if you will, certainly in the city. Do you have a plan at this point about, other than going to stakeholder meetings, do you have any other way to purvey the information about them complying with Air District rules?
Currently, we were going to utilize the advisory that we'll send to each one of them, with information on where they can get the permit applications, the applicability requirements, and with contact information for that. Other than that, I'll defer to.
So one thing I will acknowledge, we agreed when we were working with the City of Sacramento staff to continue the dialogue and stay connected. And they were hoping that they will provide a platform when they have their own meetings before council and otherwise to try to help us get the information out. But if the board has any suggestions, this was a tough question that the board posed for us, and it took us a better part of a year, but I'm very confident that we landed at a very good place and a clear place in terms of the Air District role. We want to continue to work with the City of Sacramento simply because, again, this is an issue for the city and the staff, but if you have any suggestions in terms of how to better get the information out.
Alberto, I think my more specific question is the City of Sacramento sharing with you the permittee contact information?
Not at this moment, because for one thing, I want to say we didn't specifically ask. Now, we are just beginning our process. We need to get our information out. We need to frame our permitting and where it applies and the forms and what have you. Mm-hmm. But I would anticipate, based on the constructive dialogue we had, to the extent that we need that, I feel confident that we can go out and seek that information. Likewise, I think we left the door open to the extent that they need us at the table. We're ready and more than willing to engage with them. But this is still work in progress.
Understood. I will make a point to talk to the city attorney's office and see if there's any roadblock to them sharing that information with you, and see if we can facilitate that to some extent.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff on this? Thank you.
Thank you.
So that will move on to item 6, greenhouse gas emissions inventories in the aviation sector.
Chair Terry, members of the board, I'm Paul Philly. I'm a program supervisor with the Transportation and Climate Change Division here at the Air District. And there's been a lot of exciting changes that are upcoming in the aviation sector, and we thought this would be a good time to talk about it a little bit and what it might mean for the region. So when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, the transportation sector is the largest in California at 41%, and aviation represents about 2.5% of that, or 1% of the total slice. A couple things to remember is that this inventory only counts flights that begin and end in the state of California. If you think globally, it's about 3% of the global emissions when you factor in things like international and interstate flights, and it is a growing sector. The other thing is we're only talking about emissions from the airplanes themselves. So for example, Sacramento International is currently converting its shuttles from the parking lot to zero-emission Proterra buses. That would not be counted. So to be clear, it's just in this inventory, we're only talking about the direct emissions, which typically come from either jet fuel or from aviation gasoline or avgas. When it comes to jet fuel, we don't have a lot of information or control because it's exempt. We don't permit it. It's done at the airport. It's federally regulated, and there's not a lot of zero-emission options today when it comes to replacing this fuel one-for-one. However, for avgas or aviation gasoline, it is permitted by the Air District, and it's currently dispensed in 6 different facilities throughout the county. The amount of throughput that happens is about 322,000 gallons a year, and to give you a sense of scale, if you compared it to all the other gasoline sold in the county, or the district, I should say, it's about less than 0.1%, or what a Costco would sell in 10 days, or about what 3,000 cars would use over the year. One thing that is a little bit special about avgas is that it is the only transportation fuel that's leaded left in this country. And so reduction of that inventory also has other localized health benefits we should consider. When it comes to reducing aviation emissions, the state of California has really gone all in on mode shift. So if you look at the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, a lot is going into high-speed rail, TIRCP, or the Transit Intercity Rail program. And so they want to start reducing those Northern California, Southern California trips. The other thing that also might be possible in the future is electrified automated vehicles. So if someone has a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning in Portland, it's not outside the possibility you could hire a van conversion and then sleep and then wake up in Portland for your meeting. We're also seeing a lot of desire in the industry to go to increased fuel economy. So one of the big selling points of the new Boeing Dreamliner is that it uses less fuel than a typical airplane. So there's a lot of investment going on in that area. And we're also seeing actual zero-emission planes taking off in this sector as well. So the first electric plane flew in 1917, but we actually have a modern Pipistrel Alpha Electro being tested right now in Fresno under an experimental FAA license. Central Valley is a great place to learn to fly, generally good weather, generally flat, but currently the FAA doesn't have a really good regulatory scheme for electric aviation, so that's something that needs to happen so that this sector can start to grow. When we're talking about how quickly the innovation is happening, right now we've got big players like Boeing and small startups. Wells Fargo is investing into this space. And to give you a sense of scale about how quickly this could happen, ARB seriously started talking about electric and zero-emission vehicles for cars in 1990, and today in 2018, they're generally available. Whether you want a compact, an SUV, a box truck, you can get something zero-emission. A country in Norway recently passed a regulation that all of their short-haul flights in 2040 is going to have to be zero-emission. So while it took electric cars 28 years to ramp up, we see electric aviation taking off in 22 years. When we're bringing it back home to the Sacramento region, as we wear other hats and do other things, a couple things we may wish to keep in mind. When we're doing things like electrifying ground equipment, it's basically getting electricity or hydrogen to a location is the expensive thing. It doesn't take too much more to upsize and add an additional plug. So we may want to think about multimodal opportunities when we're making these investments for charging of planes. We also have directors missing because they're trying to bring innovation to the region in our technology corridor. And so Central Valley is, and especially the Sacramento region, is a great place to be thinking about, do we want to try to support this industry and bring that investment to this region? There's also, we're a farm-to-fork capital. We have a lot of planes going around over the rice fields and other crops, which has a duty profile that fits very much with the short-range, short-hop, and cheap fuel, because it only cost about $2 to fill up that Pipistrel. So that could be a potential synergy we could have. And finally, economic inclusion is something that we may wish to consider. For example, the Young Eagle program here locally, and well nationally, takes kids up in airplanes to get them excited about the aviation sector as a potential way to join the economy and flight school is very expensive, and a big part of that is the fuel. So if we can bring down the cost of learning to fly and getting involved in aviation, we can see more potential opportunities for that. So to conclude, there's been a lot of very exciting innovations happening. There is a way for this region to be involved if we choose to be so. And I'd like to introduce Joseph Oldham from CalSTART to talk a little bit about the sustainable aviation project that's been happening in Fresno.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here today. I wish I had flown instead of driving 3 hours from Fresno. But actually the drive brought home what I like to refer to as the tyranny of ground transportation and our challenges here particularly in California, with congestion and the growing numbers of vehicles that are on our roads as we try to travel around the state. One of the exciting things that electric aviation does is it lowers the cost of aircraft operations to a point where it starts to become practical to consider short-haul flights like between Fresno and Sacramento in very economical aircraft with cost per seat mile that are rivaling the automobile. One of the exciting things that I've been able to do with the Sustainable Aviation Project, and I'm the one that's flying the aircraft, so if you want to know what it's like to fly an electric airplane, I can tell you. I have about almost 90 hours of flying in these aircraft now since we received them in March. And they are amazing. And they do some amazing things that you can't do with a piston or a turbine aircraft. And their efficiency is quite phenomenal. I drive a Chevy Volt, and I have had this car for over 5 years. And my typical electric fuel economy is about 4 miles per kilowatt hour. The Alpha Electro will actually beat that, and it beats it by quite a bit. I get typically with the Alpha Electro about 4.3 miles per kilowatt hour, and that's cruising at 73 miles per hour. If I was trying to do that in my Volt, I couldn't get that kind of fuel economy. So the efficiency of these aircraft is quite amazing, and it'll be transformative. One of the exciting things is that electric propulsion allows us to look at designs of aircraft. Paul didn't really show you some of the exciting eVTOL, which electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft designs that are out there. We've actually been working with the companies that are building these aircraft. Some of them, such as Kitty Hawk, have actually sent their test pilots down to fly with us in the Alpha Electros. We've also had visits from Boeing and Boeing Horizon X, who've been down and evaluated the aircraft and flown in them. And what we're seeing is this growing interest in taking this technology and really expanding it and democratizing it, where these aircraft can then operate at a level that the average person can afford to either fly in them, which is Uber's plan with their Uber Air service to provide a very low-cost air taxi kinds of service in congested environments. Like the Bay Area or Los Angeles, and also to provide effective short-haul flights, like say between Sacramento and say Reed Hillview in San Jose. It opens up the opportunity to use underutilized airports all across California and all across the United States, and that's why NASA and a lot of the folks at the FAA are really excited about this, and we are working very closely with the FAA. So, Paul did a great job of explaining everything that's going on in this sector. So with that, I'll just kind of close it off, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer. Okay.
I love how we're following this right after the big air show in my city.
Yeah, exactly.
Presented with the county, of course. Any questions for, yeah? Go ahead.
My understanding is the cost is less. You said
Yes.
miles per kilowatt hour. What is the cost per kilowatt hour?
Well,
Or is that a comparable? How do you compare
well, the
it?
cost per kilowatt hour is, well, I mean, it's what you pay with the typical commercial electric rate. We're paying about 20 cents a kilowatt hour for our power from PG&E down in
That's
Fresno.
quite a bit less.
Yes, it is.
What is that rate in the SMUD area?
Yeah, it's probably lower than that in SMUD.
peak hours, it's
So
13.
the aircraft typically takes about 15 kilowatt hours to do a typical flight. So we're paying 20 cents. So it's about $3 for each flight. And I can fly for about an hour on a charge and still have a healthy reserve. The aircraft has about a 60 nautical mile range at its most economical cruise speed, and about 50 nautical miles if I really want to kind of kick it up there and fly about 100 miles an hour instead of about 75.
And I've probably seen too many movies, but I have to ask this.
Sure.
I don't know how electricity responds to weather, or is there an event? I'm thinking of public safety in the way of passenger planes, whereby if it's an electric plane, is there a weather event that could disable
No.
you know, like in a nuclear event, all the phones are going to go off and the cars are going to stop in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
Is there anything like that?
No, the aircraft are actually more resilient to weather than piston or turbine engines, to be quite frank. I don't have to worry about carburetor icing, which is a condition that occurs with a piston engine aircraft if you've got high ambient humidity and or during rain or cold kinds of climate conditions. I don't have to worry about that because it's not carbureted. I don't have to worry about air intake because there is no air intake. The motor is just as efficient and just as powerful at 10,000 feet as it is at 200 feet. So there's a lot of advantages with electric propulsion. Plus, the designs are very, very compact. The motor in the Alpha Electro, a typical piston engine aircraft trainer would have a motor that would take up about the size of this podium's top here. The Alpha Electro motor is literally about this big around and about that thick. And it weighs about 11 pounds, and it's equal to an 80 horsepower gasoline piston engine. So that compact design characteristic allows electric propulsion aircraft to be designed in ways to make them extremely efficient. And so, and plus they're extremely reliable. There's only one moving part, and it's the shaft. And there's only one area that can fail on that shaft, and that's the bearings. And the motor is designed to not be touched for 2,000 hours. At 2,000 hours on a piston engine aircraft, you have to overhaul the engine, replace the bearings, the pistons, even the cylinders. And that's a huge cost. With these aircraft, you just look at the bearings. If they're okay, you put it back in for another 2,000. You do that 3 times until you hit 6,000 hours, and then you replace the motor. So there's huge savings in terms of the cost of operation.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Natoli.
Yeah, thank you for making the trip up here this morning. Just a couple questions. So you talked about the vertical takeoff.
Yes.
And thinking about getting into some of the more congested areas and even getting to airports and airspace. So will the aircraft be able to come into a urban or a suburban setting and set down without the need for an airport, much like a helicopter could?
Much like a helicopter, yes.
Okay, so you're developing that potential.
Yes.
And then you mentioned the FAA, working with them.
Yes.
So assuming this all takes off, are they prepared to be able to control the airspace? Because again, if you get this down to the point where folks are, obviously Uber and Lyft and others are, and you mentioned some of the big folks, Boeing, Horizon, because you could, to the point of the potential that you've been talking about here is that, the congestion you experience coming up from Fresno, your airspace obviously is much broader. It's not constrained to lanes, but there's still travel lanes in the air, and it's all controlled. So are they looking to that?
Yes.
Because, again, I can see where, again, some of the more some of the large airports are so congested, and that's obviously we in Sacramento benefit from some of that air traffic because folks are finding it less congested in the airspace for commercial airliners. Obviously, this may have a personal and or a commercial aspect to it, either one or both. So I'm just curious about they're looking forward because I could see there's going to require more folks and eyes on and
Yeah, Boeing, when they came down, they shared with us a video that's actually out on YouTube, and I'll be glad to send it to Alberto so he can distribute it to the board. And their video actually talks about their vision for an integrated transportation system that includes an advanced, what they refer to as the next-gen air control system that will allow both conventional commercial aircraft as well as piloted and autonomous eVTOL aircraft to all operate safely within the airspace. And they've been working very closely with the FAA as well as NASA. NASA's doing a lot of research right now with electric propulsion aircraft and what these eVTOLs will encounter in terms of air currents and atmospheric conditions flying in urban areas. Because when you start talking about flying into an airport, which is isolated and outside a normal urban area, the wind conditions around an airport are, while they can be gusty and they can come from different directions, certainly Sacramento Executive that I've flown into many times can be that way. But then when you come downtown and get around skyscrapers, now you have these venturis, now you have these air currents that are coming around those buildings, and it's going to create some challenges unless the aircraft are designed to handle that. And NASA's doing a lot of that work right now, studying that. I went to an AIA conference, the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics in Denver a year ago, and met with NASA teams that were there that were exploring all of that. And so there's a lot of work going on that the general public doesn't really know about, but the truth is, this is transformative technology. We are at a position in history, not unlike what was happening around the late 1940s, where aviation was transitioning from piston engine aircraft to jets. And we're going to see equal transitory change in our aviation industry. But when you start talking with companies like Boeing that have this integrated vision of including ground transportation with autonomous vehicles as well as electrified larger vehicles with these other air vehicles that are being developed now and combining that with large commercial aircraft, it's going to change the whole way that we move around the planet. So
just one other question as you're talking, I was thinking, so, and with the greater emphasis on folks certainly not going to brick and mortar stores to get their goods, and obviously Amazon and others have capitalized on that and been moving that marketplace, but this on-time delivery and folks talk about drones, but you see depending upon the nature and size of the things that are being ordered and delivered, that whole commercial aspect too. Again, we're with the vertical capacity to land right in somebody's front yard with this, and
Yeah, and it's initially nobody's going to be landing in people's front yards. I don't foresee. One of the advantages that we have here in the Central Valley is that we have a lot of open space. And the reason why we're able to fly our Alpha Electros today, and there's 2 of these aircraft that are down in Los Angeles that actually got there before ours did, those airplanes have not flown, and the reason is that the FAA is reluctant to allow them to fly over congested urban areas. Our aircraft flew 2 days after we received them, and it was because the FAA was very comfortable with flying these aircraft in the San Joaquin Valley. And of course, Sacramento has a great series of airports and airport infrastructure, and I could see, and I've had this conversation with Board Member Harris about the opportunities for connecting with charger infrastructure between Fresno and Sacramento and promoting a lot of additional operation for these early designs in this region. Thanks.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to Director Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Joseph, it's great to see you.
Great to see you too,
I
Jeff.
hope you'll have a little time after the meeting to visit.
Yes.
One thing you didn't touch on is the FAA regs as
Sure.
far as, the nomenclature that we've discussed many times about reciprocating
Right.
and non-turbine. In other words, for the FAA to acknowledge electric propulsion as a means to register aircraft so that they can be used for flight training. So can you catch us up on where we're at on that?
Sure. We are actively doing endurance testing on one aircraft to comply with ASTM standard 2740, which is the ASTM consensus standard for light sport aircraft for electric propulsion systems. And we're sharing that data with the FAA. And the team at the Kansas City Small Aircraft Directorate that we're working with has been evaluating all of the data that we've been collecting on all the flights with these aircraft since we received them. They've sent a team of their certification engineers as well as one of their test pilots out. Their test pilot flew with me, did 5 flights in the aircraft. They are very excited about this opportunity to work with us because these are the first production electric aircraft that have arrived and are flying in the United States. And that gives them a unique opportunity to help develop the regulatory framework for larger aircraft, as well as the certification requirements for the Part 23 aircraft, which are slightly heavier and have slightly higher performance than the light sport design that we have. So all of that is working very well. As I said, we're up to 63 hours. I've figured out how to get an hour's flight time out of the aircraft now on a charge, which is kind of cool. And so our goal is by the end of, probably by the middle of October, I'll have achieved the 100 hours. And then we'll be submitting our petition for exemption to the FAA, which we anticipate it'll be about a 120-day process to go through, but we anticipate it will be approved. And then once it's approved, the aircraft will be recertified to special light sport, and we can start doing actual flight training with them. So that's moving along pretty well, I believe.
Well, that's great to hear. I think that opens the door of opportunity to start bringing electric aircraft to the Sacramento region too. And of course, I share your vision of getting charging infrastructure between our two cities so that we can demonstrate that they can actually be cross-country aircraft as well as flight training. What probably some of my directors don't know is that when you're learning to fly small general aviation aircraft, most of your flights are near your home airport and a duration of like 45 minutes. So electric propulsion aircraft could supplant piston airplanes completely for flight training. The cost savings is dramatic, and Joseph has pointed out many times that there are tremendous opportunities for regional pilots. A lot of the Vietnam era pilots are aging out, and there is a tremendous demand for new pilots. This opens the door, and especially for people of modest income, to get into aviation, which has always been beyond the reach of people of low income in the past. So there's just tremendous opportunity here. Joseph, has anybody done any studies on the concentration of lead around general aviation airports as a result of using 100 low lead gas?
Oh, there was some analysis that we came across for our airports, Chandler Executive and a couple of the others. The lead concentrations, actual measuring the lead concentrations in the neighborhoods around those airports, I'm not aware that anyone's done that recently, but I am certain that it's probably fairly high.
That's kind of the general idea. The point I'm trying to make is that this is the only fuel with lead left in it in America, and we know that lead is a health hazard in any significant concentration. So eliminating that is a tremendous benefit, for the area. I suspect that if anybody did actually analyze the concentration of lead around GA airports, it could lead to some significant litigation. So it'd be great to avoid that, to not get to that point, but just to embrace electric propulsion in aviation, as a way to circumvent it. I'm very excited about this, and my daughter is just learning how to fly, and I really hope that I can get her into an Alpha Electro. So I look forward to coming down, and I actually want to talk to you about that, to get down to your airport and
Absolutely.
get
You're all
in one of
welcome
these
to.
airplanes finally. A couple more things I wanted to mention. Hybrid technology is catching on very quickly too.
Yes.
So for larger jet aircraft to use some aspect of battery power to promote their longevity in the air with less air quality degradation has a great potential also. And I know that some of the bigger aircraft companies are pouring many millions of dollars into hybrid technology research as we speak. And that's actually a growth industry that I hope we can capitalize upon, that not only in the Fresno area, but in the Sacramento area too, because we have decommissioned air bases that are a perfect location for that type of industry.
Yes.
Let's see, the last thing I wanted to say is, well, I guess that's about it. There's just tremendous opportunity here. It's going to be an integral part of our mobility option moving forward. But the benefits to air quality are obvious. They're 100% if you have a fully electric EV airplane. So let's move together in this direction. I really hope in my lifetime to fly down to Fresno in an electric plane. And even if it means stopping and swapping a battery pack or charging along the way, I'm willing to do it. Just as people are willing to, hit a fast charger going to the Bay Area in their electric cars. One thing that Alberto brought up is, in terms of promoting electric propulsion, what could be better than showing a picture of an electric airplane flying? For people who are hesitant to adopt electric propulsion in their automobile, once they see that you can actually get places in an electric airplane, I think it really opens the door. And it's certainly a great talking point. If you can fly with a battery, you can certainly drive with the battery.
Well, that was exactly, we actually coined a little catchphrase like that when we submitted our grant application to Fresno County Transportation Authority. We said, well, if you can fly electric, you can drive electric. And it does. It is true. One of the things I will point out really quickly, because you mentioned hybrid, when we had this conversation with Boeing Horizon X, and they spent a couple of days with us, which was really, really special. We were talking about the Zunum hybrid small airliner, thin haul airliner is what they're referred to. And I brought up the point, I said, well, the thing will probably be like a plug-in hybrid where you'll plug it into the airport infrastructure while it's on the ground so you can charge the batteries so the gas turbine generator won't be running. And they kind of looked at me and they had that look like, oh, how did you figure that out? And it's logical, right? So I suspect that that's exactly the way these things are going to operate, because they want to conserve the amount of liquid fuel that they carry on board, because if they carry too much, it's just extra weight, and weight is certainly the challenge with aircraft. So I think it's going to be an amazing future, and we're leading it, which is awesome. And I think that's a great opportunity for us to capitalize on moving forward.
Global airline travel is a very significant contributor to climate change.
It is.
And any efficiency we can garner by hybrid technology is going to be a great boon. I don't see people, moving away from jet travel. So gaining efficiencies in that area is extremely important.
Yes.
It's really a great field to be in right now.
Yes.
If I was a young engineer, that's where I'd be.
Yep, absolutely.
Joseph, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to Director Fox.
There was one other question.
I just wanted to say I'm very excited about this, but you mentioned a YouTube, and if we could see that YouTube, I would be interested in seeing it.
I will definitely, as soon as I get back to my office this afternoon, I'll send it to Alberto so that he can distribute it to the board. It's about a 3.5-minute video, and it's really cool.
Or come over to my iPad when we're done and I'll show it to you.
I searched for it just on Boeing Horizon X, and I couldn't find it, but they sent me the link, so I'll send it to you. Okay, thank you all very much.
One quick question.
Oh, no, we have a few more questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
estimated time in the future when the electric engine for the aircraft meets the qualifications to make it equal to what the avgas production would be with the 206 or something similar for light commercial use?
Well, the electric motors are there now. In fact, Siemens has a 260 kilowatt aircraft electric motor that they've actually mounted in an extra 300 that broke the climb records for ground to 10,000 feet. The power of the motor is not the issue. It's the battery technology to, provide the endurance is really the challenge. And the engineers that I talk to, both, with the manufacturer like Pipistrel and others, they believe that probably by somewhere around 2025, we'll have battery technology that will allow an aircraft of something like a 206 to fly for a couple of hours and then, land and recharge.
So that makes light, short distance commercial use
Yes.
not that far in the distance.
Not that far in the future. Uber is planning to test their Uber Air service by 2020, so a year and a half. Kitty Hawk, one of the companies that's actually designing and building an aircraft, an eVTOL electric aircraft that would participate in that service. They actually have two prototypes. One of them's in Hollister, California, just down the road, and the other one is flying in New Zealand, and they're starting to do evaluation flights in New Zealand. So, and they're just one of number of them. The FAA told us that they have seen over 100 designs of these aircraft coming through their doors for initial certification evaluations. So this is not a small thing by any means.
So if we can get the batteries there, we've got the capability of...
We get the batteries there, we've got the capability. And the thing that's driving the battery technology is not aircraft, it is these. Because there's billions of these, and everybody wants a faster, bigger, more powerful this. And so this is what's driving the technology for the cars, for the airplanes, for the trucks, and for the buses. And the similarity between the aircraft and the trucks and the buses is astounding. The charger sizing, the electrical capacity needs, they're very, very similar, almost identical. And CalSTART is seeing that because we're deploying electric trucks, electric buses, and now we're working with electric airplanes. So,
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Director Cruz.
Oh, thank you. I'm really impressed with this as well. I'm looking forward to it. The biggest issue has been brought up as far as commercial airlines, but I do have a couple of questions. You mentioned the batteries, and lithium-ion batteries at this point are a little sketchy depending upon the vehicle or phone you have in your hand. How do you think they're going to be addressing the weight issue with the 277 pounds, I think, of batteries in one of these versus 84 pounds of fuel?
Yeah, it's, well, for the Alpha Electro, it's not a problem because the way Pipistrel designed the aircraft, the Alpha Electro is the same performance and weight and characteristics as the gasoline version. The big difference is with electric, you can't offload fuel to add more payload. So your payload is your payload. And so I'm more limited than if I was flying a gas version of the same aircraft. Same aircraft, in gas, I could offload some fuel and carry a 250-pound passenger. In the Alpha Electro, I can't. I'm limited to 200 pounds. So energy density per kilogram is going to be our driver on these aircraft to a large degree. But that is improving very steadily. And so, everybody that we are talking to foresees a day within a next 3 to 5 years where you're going to get energy densities per kilogram that are going to approach gasoline, but probably won't quite get there because gasoline's like 700 watts per kilogram in terms of its energy density. And right now, the batteries that are in the Alpha Electros are about 250 watts per kilogram. But there are battery technologies out there that are pushing up on 500 and plus watts per kilogram. So it's moving. It's moving in the right direction.
I think it's a great idea. I'm looking forward to seeing more of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments for myself. I had the opportunity as part of the National League of Cities Community and Economic Development Team, federal task force or whatever we call it, to visit Fort Worth, and in particular Bell Helicopters headquarters, where they have their Uber Elevate simulator that all of us city council members and mayors got to ride in and actually feel what it would be like to skip traffic and go from work all the way to your house and seeing all of the traffic below you.
Yes.
But there's some really interesting innovations coming along in a lot of these spaces. And as much as I respect my colleague here from Sacramento, there is another airport in my city that has a whole lot of open space around it. And then again, that's where they just had an air show. So if there's any way for us to partner there, and I know there's a flight school there now, and there's, it's one of the longest runways, I think, this side of the Mississippi, and I see trainers there all the time, including the U2 trainers that come at least 2 to 4 times a day. So if there's any way for us to partner between Fresno and my city or anywhere else in the region, I'd be very interested in that. And then
pardon my ignorance, but what city are you?
Rancho Cordova, so Mather Airport.
Got it. Yeah.
And so the only other thing I was going to comment about that you kind of touched on, but just something that I read that to explain it, at least the need for additional training hours for folks is in these regional airlines, the smaller jets. So even American's company, I can't remember what it is on the West Coast that does the LA trips and the Seattles and some of the shorter trips. That they're really struggling to find enough pilots for those flights. The international ones are fine; they pay really great. The other ones, they're just not finding people to do it. And one of the biggest struggles is paying out of pocket to get your hours to keep your license so that you can even get that job.
Yes.
And it just doesn't pay enough in order for you to spend the 80 hours or whatever it takes you to get your license to actually even apply for that job. So this is not only something very important as far as air and health, it's also a huge economic development opportunity if we can harness it here.
Yeah, so it is. And it's 1,500 hours is what
1,500, there you go.
1,500 hours just to get into the right seat on a regional jet.
That's right.
That is a real challenge right now, because that 1,500 hours represents a lot of investment.
What's the average? I know my wife is trying to get her just regular pilot's license, not that. To get 1,500 hours ballpark, what does that cost someone?
It's the numbers that I've heard are somewhere in the range of $60,000, and because the more advanced aircraft that you have to fly, because you can't just get 1,500 hours as a private pilot. You have to get 1,500 hours total, which includes you need a commercial rating, you need an instrument rating. They prefer that you've got a CFI rating, certified flight instructor rating. And so all of those, and multi-engine, and so all of those ratings, you end up having to fly more expensive aircraft, and the hourly rate for the rental on the aircraft just gets higher and higher, not to mention the instructor fees.
Yeah, so what I've read is that essentially the only place that you're going to get those certifications is if you go into the military. And the military does not have a need for that many pilots anymore, especially with drone technology and a lot of other things driving it. And so it's really fascinating if there's a way to bring that cost down and have that kind of capability in my city or your city or around here. That could be a huge economic driver for this region.
Just to give you a comparison on what we estimate the fully burdened operating cost on an Alpha Electro when we get them into flight training, we anticipate we can rent them for about $50 a flight or $50 an hour. And that compares to a 50 to 60-year-old gas trainer on our field that rents for about $125 an hour. So you start adding that up over 40, 50 hours of flight time, it makes a big difference. And there's more advanced training aircraft that are electrically powered already in the works. So yeah, it's coming.
Thank you.
Chair Terry, I just wanted two final comments. First, certainly in the program that I'm envisioning, We're looking at charging infrastructure at Mather, in fact, all of our regional airports. So it's a regional vision, not a city vision. Just wanted to assure you of that.
Appreciate that.
The other thing is, as far as safety, you know, engine out forced landings is a pretty common thing with piston aircraft. I've experienced it myself twice. You know, they're survivable, certainly, but the dependability of an electric motor compared to a piston aircraft, and Joseph alluded to this, is tremendous. And I think that we would probably see a decrease in aviation accidents as a result of adopting electric propulsion.
Yes.
That's it.
Thank you. Director Gaylord.
Yeah, I just had two questions. One, what's the safety and terrorism aspect to this, as far as if this became a mass transit type solution, you know, and you have like Uber with drivers but pilots taking folks who book it on an app. What's the outlook on that, as far as getting someone you may or may not know that could utilize that plane in some sort of attack or something?
Well, the aircraft, I mean, I guess we could theorize on this all day long. I believe Uber is building quite a few security protocols into their service, especially if they're going to be offering it as an autonomous service. The service, you know, the aircraft themselves, however, are quite light, so they don't have much mass. If someone tried to crash them into a building, the building's going to win. The aircraft itself are you know, Kevlar fiberglass, and they're just not that substantial. The gross weight on our Alpha Electros are 1,200 pounds, and so you know, I don't even know that I could even speculate on that at this point. I can tell you that from a safety perspective, our Alpha Electros are equipped with ballistic recovery parachutes. So if there is a catastrophic failure, and the catastrophic failure I would envision is if somebody runs into me and cuts off my tail or cuts off part of the wing, I'll pull the chute. Any other scenario, and I'd fly the airplane and land it, because they glide amazingly well. They have about a 17-to-1 glide ratio. In fact, the other day, Jeff, you'll appreciate this, I was 2,300 feet, 3.5 miles out from Chandler on a 45-degree approach into the downwind for landing, and I cut the power to 0 and just glided the airplane all the way down to the ground without even touching the throttle. So, you know, that's amazing what they can do. Mm-hmm.
I would just also point out to part of your question, if it did run into something, it's not carrying any fuel comparatively to other instances in our history where that's been an issue. Okay, if there aren't any other questions, do we have any public comment on this item? Okay, thank you very much. This was really informative.
Thank you very much.
So with that, do we have any public comment?
No, we do not.
Okay, any board ideas or comments? Seeing none, do we have any announcements? Nope. We will stand adjourned.